Klaus. Once again, a score that has beautiful cinematic sensibilities, and I really regret that you didn't join at a higher level so that I could evaluate your entire score. But I sense that you may not have felt that some of the later parts were quite finished yet. So, I was looking over them recently, and I sort of noted that there were some parts there that I think that you were in the stage of developing, but you hadn't quite gotten them totally ready for me to comment on. So that's all fair, but there are some great parts in your full orchestration of this, and I think that if you were to maybe tidy it up a little bit, and then maybe if any of my observations are useful as well, maybe incorporate those, and then maybe release your own video of it or your own SoundCloud clip or whatever, and then share it with the community. I'm sure that people would love to see that as well. However, let us just limit ourselves to this evaluation. Now, I'm noticing, on this first prologue here, there is a lot of textural progression. Here, I'm just making sure that I have all my screens ready. So yeah, do you have an emotional and timbral progression? Yes, you do. In fact, throughout this entire arrangement, you have really checked that box. As for the pitch weight being in the upper middle register of the piano, you tick that box as well. You have some lower notes here and there. You don't keep it so limited as the piano score. In fact, you make massive changes, including to the harmony in some places. I don't know if I totally agree with them, but it's not my place to really tell you whether or not you are getting the harmony right, just more to comment on whether or not it is in the style. Because of the way you are setting up the harmony for this bar, I think that I'll give you a pass on the way you change the harmony for these two bars. Okay, in anticipation of how, the emotional point that you're making here musically. I think that that's really valuable. However, everything is mezzo forte, schmezzo forte. It's just too much mezzo forte. Okay, now. It's recently been observed that mezzo forte is a very welcome dynamic to use in film scores and film cues, because you don't want the music to be too soft to hear, and you don't want it to be shouting over the dialogue. That's all fair, but this is a concert score, okay? So what I would do is, I would really recommend, maybe back off here, right? And then set things up to push into this at a stronger dynamic. As for the beginning, I don't think you need to be mezzo forte there either, right? I mean, I think we need to set this up with cool calmness, especially with these beautiful, these beautiful instruments that you've got in here, celesta and harp and so on. So I think that it'll be much more effective at a softer dynamic. I think you just said piano espressivo, right? And I think they would balance across all the instruments. I don't think you need to do any dynamic mixing of the harp and the celesta being louder. I think that it would work fine. And then here, you could maybe do a crescendo piano espressivo to mezzo forte and then back down to mezzo piano. And then here, you could have this push the way you've got it scored here. I love the idea of cushions, the way that you've got sort of these kind of background pads and things like that. I think that works fine. Just like so you just have to say oboe. You don't have to say one oboes, right? This is all you need. Okay, oboe. We know it's one oboe. It's a little lonely, but it's fine. Okay, I do not think you need to go to A2 here at all, right? You're just getting that sort of more kind of a sound, right? Like when you go A2 on flutes and A3, A4, and so on, and just start to stack them, you get more and more of the breath sound, and the you don't necessarily get the sound to be twice as loud. It's maybe twice as dense, right? It's twice as thick, but thickness isn't volume, all right? Okay, but all that aside, I think that it's fine. Sorry, there's going to be a little bit of a sort of kind of a whispery. Speaking of breathy noises, there's going to be a little bit of a whispery sound from my laptop, which has suddenly decided to turn its fan on and dump heat. I mean, I got to say that both of my computers are really acting up lately. I'm going to need a new laptop. I'm probably a couple of years overdue for that, and my desktop system has started to have a problem with its fan. Hopefully that won't kick in while I'm trying to record, but anyway. On to this piece. Sorry, I shouldn't complain about my own problems on this. Now here you've got a voice crossing between violins and cellos, and I mean, this is really interesting, the way that you've scored it all out. I almost feel like you want the best of both worlds, right? You want really high tenor register cellos, and then you want sort of these kind of lower, more bassy cellos down here, and then you want this other line in here. And it's just a little bit messy, the way that this is scored right in here. There are ways of making this a little bit cleaner, which sadly would have might have less cello in it, right? Like, one way to do this would be to have it all, have it all cello right in here, right? Just have the cello come out. See how much you could give this line to the violas, and divide that up amongst the violas, and see how much of this viola part could go to the second violins. I think it all could go to the second violins, because you're not going any lower than G. And then this part could be played by first violins. I think that would be a better compromise, rather than, because I just feel like the way that it's scored, I just don't, I feel like by splitting things up here, you're sort of losing some of the uniqueness of the cello, in a way, if you know what I mean. And then here, where the voices are kind of stacked, then that you can just have your cellos go down to E, and then like these other instruments can be split across first, second, and violas, right? Okay, so I think this needs to be cleaned up a little bit, and then this is all really lovely right in here, just like the way that this is working together. But I really will say one thing: I really like how you didn't just dump the piano slurring onto your flutes and so on, and onto the winds and strings. That does not mean that they don't need some slurs, right? You could have had a slur across this whole bar, or you could have had a slur between these two notes, and you could have had more slurring. In fact, you are really kind of missing a lot of slurring. I think, like right here, for instance, you could go, up, down, the slur, and then up, down, right? Like there are just some things in here, and the same thing with I think slurring in the horns. So I think that there are some ways to make things sound a little smoother, right? So even in the mock-up, we can sort of hear a kind of sense of clunkiness from time to time. For instance, like this could be slurred, right? That could be slurred. This could be slurred right in here, right? So there's definitely some room here, but I would not slur across repeated notes, right? Right? Just avoid that in the approach that you have got here. You do need this enunciated clearly. Okay, and then this is lovely right in here. You've got this little flight of fancy here. This, once again, cinematic touch, right? And this the revving up, starting in the strings here. I think that's all lovely, right? Sometimes you have things that don't exactly follow other things, right? That, like the contrast between the things, or the way that the melody is supposed to pick up and lead to something else, doesn't quite connect, right? So we'll be commenting on that. And then one of the first things I think is this, like the way that this is set up. Like you have this gesture that rises here and it sort of falls off here and stops in the middle of the bar, and so there's like a kind of a big gasp here in all the other parts. And then here, this is descending. Once again, room for slurs, right? Would really work. And then when you hit here, these other instruments come in and they just feel very sudden and abrupt. Now here in the harp, this is like not going to make much of a difference at all. You could do half pizzicato, half arco here and get a better effect than what you are expecting here. Or you could have like a timpani stroke, going dunk, would probably work, right? So yeah. But you do, you already have a timpani. Sorry, not a timpani, but you have a tam-tam stroke right here. I'm just gonna close this laptop here. Okay. Yeah, so just like there's a feeling of disconnect here. I feel like there's just something really sudden about this, right? Everything is kind of calming down, and all of a sudden you have this kind of this jolt of sound here. All right. So going on, we're going to English horn in the melody, and once again, I think that there could be some slurring here. Da, da. So just slur like everything in the first, right? And then, so why does the English horn just kind of stop, and the harmonizing French horn continues on, right? So that the harmony note keeps going while the melody note stops. I don't get it. Why? Is it because you have this stuff? This, once again, cinematic gestures, this sort of fluttering stuff coming down. It doesn't. There's even because this, even that this happens, there's no need to stop your melody. And then here, where does the middle voice go? Right? It's almost like these gaps. It's almost like you just erased these bars or forgot to put them in or something. I just really feel the absence. This doesn't connect to anything, right? And once again, we have like kind of lack of that middle voice at the beginning, which is fine, and then you pick it up, but then, right? But I mean, it's really beautiful. Like, but and the other thing that I would say to watch out for is marimba, right? And right here, I would actually recommend soft mallets, because the way that it is scored right now, you really hear the gap, right? We sort of have the thunk, 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 and then suddenly no thunks, right? And then it continues on. So I would really recommend soft mallets here if you really want this approach where you have a gap between the marimba, because really the absence of it and the absence of the middle voice and all of these other absences, I just really feel, right? It's just, what is going on here? And then we have like this kind of delayed trombone right in here. Right? So I'm not sure that this totally works in terms of like maintaining the integrity of the parts, right? I just feel like you need more. Okay, cup. So this came up in the group today. All right, so you could just say cup mute. You don't need to say consort and then say cup. Here you can say sensasort and get rid of the cup mute, or mutes off or whatever. But cup mute. So do you mean open cup or closed cup? Right? So an open cup has a sort of an E sound, and the closed cup has a sort of a oh sound, right? So it's not just cup mute, right? So I mean, I get the feeling that there's probably some sort of default, right? If the players see that you want a cup mute, they just put it in closed. But just clarify, right? Clarify. It has two settings. Some people would even say it has more than that. I mean, I've seen some players just have it almost closed and just have it a little bit, but not all the way open and so on. So I think that it's a little bit like a harmon mute. There can be some degrees in there, and I'd actually like to do a little bit more research on it myself, but maybe do some spectrographs and so people can see the difference. All right, and then once again, I think that you could have more slurred tones in here, right? Da ta rather than ta 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 ta. Yes, it just really does feel very connected and not as smooth. And right in here you have arco, right? So, okay, there's a lot of repeated notes. Could some of these be like portato? Rather than dun 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 dun, up down up down up down. I mean, could there be a way of playing this that is smoother, right? Maybe portato on the repeated notes, and then slurs, nice slurs on the notes that are sequential. Sequential pitches rather than repeated pitches. Anyway, so I mean, yeah, I just feel that there's just a little bit more finesse that could be done here, and I think also that your marimba lines can have also. I mean, some people say, oh well, you don't need to put phrasing on a mallet instrument, but I would say a marimba is, I mean, just like to show them that there's a shape to things, right? And the same thing here. Do you really want dun 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 dun, or do you want da 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 da? Do you really want that separated sound in here? It just feels so clunky to me. And like, because you are trying to go for this really smooth, beautiful pastel kind of scoring in here. It's very impressionistic scoring, but we're not seeing some of those features, right? And God, I wish that there were different mallet settings in like. I mean, I cannot believe this. All right, if anybody out there from Note Performer is listening, or from Sibelius is listening, could there please be some mallet settings, like soft mallets? I mean, just really generic. They don't have to be like down to like medium yarn or anything like that. But if there could just be like a generic soft mallet sound, a generic hard mallet sound, a generic medium mallet sound. I mean, I just feel that there is so much. There is just so much room here for some improvement in there. Nice little bell stroke right in here, by the way. I think that's very cool, right? So is it 3 a.m. or 3 p.m. in the village? I want to know. It's sort of like that one, the ending of the A flat major Chopin prelude, right? Like, what time of night is it? Right? When he's playing that, it is midnight, right? Because he has 12 strokes. And then he has like another one at the end, but that doesn't count. But he has like 12 in a row. That's very, very cool. All right, so and then like just in terms of dynamics, just watch out. You have a lot of like loud versus soft and so on and so forth. I think that there are ways of organizing the dynamics on this that are more cohesive, right? But I do appreciate that you're keeping the brass from exploding across the page. And letting the winds have a chance and so on. So I think that some of your really soft dynamics could come up in your winds and strings and yeah, I mean, I think that this is not really needed, like to have really really soft strings against mezzo forte cellos and so on. I mean, I think that some of this is just you can even out some of the dynamics and get a nice fuller, more coherent sound, and I think that actually the ideas will come out. Like, I think I understand why this is happening, is you want the cello pizzicato to be stronger, but I just think that the coherency of the idea is going to come through anyways, just in the way that you've scored it. All right. So next page, right? So we're getting to the juicy stuff here. Okay. So I love all of this, all of these gestures. Like, once again, we're really hanging out in the mezzo dynamics area. Could this page have been more breathtaking if you went back down to like piano and just like had all this and then added some nuances, right? Rather than having it just be really just like kind of a generic forte and mezzo forte most of the time, but had it soft and had had these beautiful lines emerge and then retreat again. Right? This is all really cool. The harp and celesta and so on. Yeah. So I mean, not too many critical comments to make here. The horns and the trumpets and so on are basically just maintaining the same dynamics as the previous page, right? Sort of mezzo forte-ish. So that's all good. And just once again, little chimes, tam tam, and so on. All right, so here we're getting into So first ST, oh, first, I see, just one period. Or first stand. Yeah, okay, so like I don't know if you can hear it, but like there is a lot of A2 clarinet in this, and yeah, I feel like you're really going to get that phased sound. Like this is a very exposed part right here, and it's not really doubled by much, right? Like here the bassoon is doubling with the cellos, but here the clarinets are kind of playing hand in hand with the bass clarinet and so on, and like that really intense phased sound is going to come through. I mean, it's maybe not so bad because of the fact that you're actually adding the bass clarinet to it, so you have like a triple sound. So it's a little bit. It has kind of has this kind of clearer, more intense sound. Like the phasing starts to become a little less noticeable, but it's still there a little bit. I don't know. I don't know. I'm sort of shaking my head at that a little bit, but I mean, it is a beautiful, intense sound. Leave it in. Don't change it for my sake. But I just say watch out, right? But it is the kind of thing to have like. In a section like this where you really do need a line to cut through under all of these flurries that are sort of arcing through the strings. This reminds me a lot of like of the lessons that I did on Ravel's Un Barque. That kind of string scoring. Very, very cool. Yeah, so the nautical Barvinsky, there is a lot of coastal areas in Ukraine. So yeah, so this kind of rip up here, and then I mean it's yeah. So I think the first one is really effective, right? So and you have your solo violin here and piccolo playing in octaves, and your solo viola coming in here, kind of grabbing the top of that, and I think that I think you sort of feel a kind of cutoff here. I would almost wonder whether or not some other instrument could come in here and grab the bottom of this, and everything could kind of all connect together in some way in octaves. And then, yeah, so what if this started at pianissimo and pushed forward to mezzo forte, right? Rather than kind of, I feel even at piano, it sort of hits this second pulse here a little hard. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just really some lovely stuff that you've got in here. Really enjoying it, Klaus. Right, and then right in here, like this is what I didn't find convincing. Like there are a couple of other little kind of non sequiturs, like does not follow, kind of moments that are not all that critical. But I think right in here, this one is critical. Right, I'm really not feeling the handoff. Like you have elevated the left hand part way high, it up into the English horn, and then here you have the bassoon kind of taking over from below and then playing what was originally a very, very high melody. And I understand that. I get that. But I just feel that it just doesn't... The bassoon doesn't really appear to follow in the same way. Like it doesn't grab the crest of that phrase and really move it forward. It just sort of seems like this new thing, and it's almost a jolt. Right, the construction of this phrase in the piano part has a certain logic to it, right? And I feel that logic has been removed. So if there was some way of having what happens in the English horn part connect to seamlessly into the bassoon and continue on, that would be one way of dealing with it. If there was some way of reorganizing some of these materials a little bit, that would also be good. I'm not a huge fan of this piano in the piccolo pianissimo in the flutes, and so I mean I think that's completely unnecessary. All right. Yeah, and this right in here, I think that this high mezzo forte solo violin, I'm assuming that it's still solo, is I feel that this completely distracts from what you're trying to set up here in the English horn and so just like everybody could be piano or pianissimo here. Let's say piano, diminuendo to pianissimo for everybody. Diminuendo marks missing, or where are they? They should all be in all parts, right? You just want a very soft cushion behind what's happening here in your bassoon part. I really want this bassoon part to work, Klaus. I'm not putting it down. I'm just wondering if you can set it up in a way that where it feels more logical and rather than just sort of dropped in, right? Okay, so now we're getting to the last section for this evaluation, but not of the piece. It goes on, and once again, Klaus, I'm going to recommend that you, maybe clean up that last section and maybe incorporate a few suggestions if they're useful from me, and then release your own version of this as its own video. Like maybe you already have, and you're saying, I know, Thomas, haven't you seen it? So, in which case, apologies. Okay, and then here I would, like at the beginning of the section, I would mark a new dynamic, even though there's, see, like here you have piano, right? So if this is piano, it's a solo, you could put some nuances in here, leading to, right in here, like obviously this is intended to be forte, right? So, and once again, forte, right? There's just so much forte and mezzo forte and blah, blah, blah. Why couldn't you go down to soft here? Right? There's just been so much, so many big dynamics. Why couldn't this all be kind of at a piano dynamic, right? Because then it sort of things lead to the next thing, right? Because this is a transitional section, right? It is kind of preparing you for the big development to come in the D section, and it is wrapping up the kind of sense of isolation of the B section, right? So in this section is sort of like coming back to home base and getting ready to jump into the next thing. All right. Okay, so as far as the scoring is concerned, I think it's really delightful. Like, once again, the section C is where a lot of real beauty is starting to happen in a lot of these dotted semi-brev scores. And here's where I think like some of these gestures really do pay off, right? This is all really fun. Like once again, we have got this lovely stack of low winds that actually was an approach that was taken in the previous score by Christian. And we're seeing some accompaniment here, some further context here, and doubling and so on from violas, or interaction from the violas. I mean, I think it should be... I mean, I feel that there should be more unity between these parts, right? Rather than... But I mean, I see what you're trying to do here with the violas. Yeah, so this is actually pretty doable, because like you've got an open G here, so you can sort of finger an octave, like finger the octave G's above on the first and second string, and then just grab the third string, and then like this is all playable, just as long as you don't make it too fancy, right? Just sort of stick with those pitches and don't add anything weird. Then you're all right. So I think that this is all pretty doable on cello. Like maybe cellists will correct me. There's something I haven't thought of, but it just seems to me like this is especially like using the thumb if you needed to get this octave in here. But I don't even know if that is really even needed. So yeah, I mean, it's just very cool the way that it is all kind of divided up and working together and so on. Yeah, and this is nice. Apologies for I think there's a weed whacker going on in the background. Yeah, and this just little celesta right in here. So yeah, so once again, like celesta is a really soft instrument. So if you were to just bring down the dynamic here to piano, like I think that this would just it would just bubble along, and then you could have some nuances in here. You could push on some parts and so on. And then like right in here, if this were also piano, maybe mezzo piano, then it would then the celesta would be much more audible against like piccolo and flutes and so on and so forth. Right? And then here you could push into the next section, which I'm not going to turn the page because it's a bit of a mess the way that I've resized all of the staves so that they're a little bit more readable in the way that they're displayed, at least for my purposes. So like on the next page there, it's really a big jumble. So I wish I could show it, but I think, you know, rather than sort of easing off here, this could push into the next section and that could be stronger, right? But it's all really cool. I love the horns. If you drop the dynamic, then drop the horns down to pianissimo. But I mean, it's so cool. I just really love this. Very effervescent. You know, there's a sense of like a kind of a calm surface with a lot of stuff bubbling beneath, right? Sort of almost like a you know, almost like a perfectly flat ice on top of a lake in the wintertime, and then there are all these fish kind of like swimming around underneath, is what it sort of reminds me of. Or like maybe like the top of a pot. to change temperatures in my metaphor, the top of a pot that's sitting on top of on top of some, you know, something on the oven, and you know the top of the lid is just perfectly still, but then you open it up, you know, if you were to take the lid off, you would see that it's simmering underneath. So yeah, I really like this. Great work, Klaus, and yeah, thanks so much for the huge effort you put into this entry. You know, just really orchestrating the entire thing, and you always have so much enthusiasm, and you always bring me your best, and I really appreciate that. It always brings up the level of excitement and quality and intensity of these orchestration challenges when I get that kind of, you know, long-term contribution from one of the members of this community. So I really appreciate that, Klaus, and thank you so much for supporting this year. Really does mean a lot. I'll have more information about that soon, about the money we're raising for Ukrainian musicians. I mean, it isn't going to be like, I mean, it's not like I'm making hundreds of thousands of dollars on Patreon or anything like that. I'm just making a modest amount, but I'm going to be sending a significant proportion of that to, you know, from our patrons to Ukrainian musicians. So I'll have some more information about that coming very soon if it hasn't dropped already. So thanks one and all. Thank you so much, supporters. Thank you, Klaus. Thanks everybody who's watched this far. You know what to do. You've already started thinking about what you're going to say about this score and about this, so just drop it in the comments below. Much, much appreciated by Klaus, by me, by all the other dotted semi-brev contributors who should also be commenting on each other's scores, right? So Klaus, you know what to do with all the other dotted semi-brev contributors. So any constructive observations and suggestions, they're really needed. So please contribute them. I'm really having a great morning here, and this is actually my third evaluation of this day, and I think I'm going to go ahead and do some more. So just really, I'm getting so much great energy, and it always makes me feel so good to sit down with somebody's score and to give somebody some feedback about it, because it really challenges me to be as observant as I can and to really take note of where people are going with their art, and they come up with ideas that I've never thought of, right? So, especially in a score like this. So, thanks so much, everybody. I will see you in the next evaluation.